There have been rumors circulating that Season 12 is going to be the last season of the show. If this is true, let's hope for a better series finale this time, Curb Your Enthusiasm is an original dark comedy series on HBO that premiered in 1999 as a one-hour special. It was created by Seinfeld co-creator Larry David and has had a great influence in not only meme culture with its iconic theme, but popular culture overall. The show is where the term Larry David moment came from as a way to describe when someone gets themselves into embarrassing situations. There have been rumors circulating that the upcoming 12th season might be the last, as I said, so I figured, since I want to try other things on my channel, and since I wanted to review it while it's still going on, I thought this was the perfect time to review it. Anyway, let's get started. The premise of the show centers on a fictionalized version of Larry David and the many interactions he has with friends, family, and coworkers. Trouble is, Larry just can't seem to keep himself out of trouble, and he seems to have a problem with interacting with people without stirring up problems. His abrasive personality is a big part of this due to the fact that basically Larry has little to no filter. So, obviously, this gets him into a lot of trouble. It has gotten him kicked out of places and even caused him to even create some enemies. But of course, Larry never learns. Which is probably the main highlight of the show, Larry's lack of impulse control. He has done so many careless, and even awful, things, but the fact that he is such a callous person is what makes him so entertaining to watch. But he's also a very complex character because there are times where you can understand why he's being confrontational with someone. Is it still wrong on his part? Yeah, but you can still understand where he is coming from. At times. Such as with the ring stain that he had to pay for. Of course, the way he went about it was ridiculous, but you understand why he's so determined to find out who made the stain. Or when he asked that one man how his father was still alive if he was a kamikaze pilot. Basically, Larry David is a character you can love to hate, yet you can't help but to agree with him, sometimes. Doesn't help that he can also be very adamant. You don't get a lot of comedy shows like this today. This is because this show has a very edgy sense of humor, which unfortunately is very taboo to approach nowadays. Now, it seems like the problem is that people try too hard to be edgy, try to be too edgy when it comes to that kind of humor, to the point where it just kind of goes into edgelord territory, which in turn makes it come off as kind of obnoxious. This show, however, perfectly balances the edge and the humor so that the really funny moments can play off the really tense ones. I give Premise an A+. Very refreshing that a show like this is still airing. Next is characters. The characters are probably another main highlight of the show simply because of the way they interact with each other. As mentioned before, Larry doesn't know when to keep his mouth shut or let go of pitiful, unimportant things, so of course, this has potential for some amazing banter. And depending on who Larry is interacting with, it can vary. His friend Jeff might get a little annoyed with him, but at this point is used to Larry's insanity. For the most part, he doesn't really bother to explain to Larry that there is a better way to deal with his issues. He just sits back and watches Larry make a fool of himself in the most hilarious way possible. Jeff's wife, Susan, who is probably the next best character to Larry due to her extremely profane and vulgar vocabulary, as well as her sweet yet fierce personality. She's kind of badass in that sense. Would most likely end up getting frustrated or even furious with him and want him out of her sight. And given Larry's lack of a filter, always seems to put him in a situation where they are at each other's throats. Might not sound funny with me describing it, but seeing it executed on screen is just hysterical because they can never seem to go 1 minute without fighting. Also, this is probably the best interaction that they've had.
What's going on?
Oh, hey, sis.
Hi, how are you?
What do you mean Cheryl banned you from the house? What's going on?
Who just said I was banned?
I heard you. Don't try to bullshit me. Why? What happened?
What's gonna happen if I don't tell?
Well, I'll call call Cheryl and find out. What the fuck difference does it make?
Well, okay. Last Passover.
You what? You jerked off in their house?
Yeah.
Oh, that is sick.
Yeah, of course I jerked off in my friend's house. Doesn't everyone do it? Anyway, back to characters. Marty Funkhauser, rest in peace Bob Einstein, is probably by default one of the sweetest characters on the show. Don't get me wrong, he does pick up on Larry's shenanigans due to being friends with him, but he still tries to do everything he can for those close to him. Now, Funkman's a family man, you see. He's very kind, sweet, and gentle. Probably the nicest amongst Larry's friend circle, so it takes a lot to piss him off. But Larry David still manages to pull it off. There's one episode where, for example, it involves poor Funkhauser's parents getting killed. So, instead of being mournful, Larry instead complains that he is too old to be considered an orphan, demands a 50 he owed him, and jokingly calls him Little More Orphan Marty. And part of what makes Funkhauser great is his delivery. Bob Einstein is somewhat deadpan when he says his lines such as, "Do you crap when standing up?" And the way he swears is fucking phenomenal because, like with Susan, he adds a hard emphasis to it when he does. Especially with words like shit, dick, and cock. He adds like a hard k sound. Richard Lewis is on the show, and the banter he and Larry exchange is nothing short of amazing. Just look at this clip.
Thanks a lot.
Fuck you, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Fucking idiot.
That clip pretty much sums up their friendship in the show. They fight and argue a whole lot, yet still somehow remain in close contact. One of my favorite running gags is when he's always down to do contests with Larry. Like when he accused him of being when Larry accused him of being crazy, so Richard says, "I will have a mental patient standoff with you anytime you want." Now, Cheryl, Larry's wife, is one of the funniest characters on this show specifically because of the way she interacts off of Larry. As I've said before, Larry would just say what's on his mind and can be very careless. So it seems like Cheryl is always having to reprimand him and tell him, even when he is in the right. The way he goes about things is just ludicrous. And the way she does it is just fantastic because it's like seeing a parent reprimanding a child for being bad. Especially in the episode Trick or Treat where their house is teepeed after Larry refused to give 2 measly pieces of candy to 2 girls he thought were too old for trick-or-treating. It was like a parent scolding a child after making a mess. And, of course, as if things couldn't get any worse, Larry finds some way to escalate the argument and is forced to spend the rest of the day cleaning. Now, they do have some really sweet and tender moments in the more recent seasons, which is a shame given what happens, although you can probably figure it out. But our interactions with Larry still come off as hilarious because there are times when it's implied poor Larry still has feelings for her, so therefore, she's always finding herself in some very awkward situations. All in all, though, she's a good character. Leon Black, who coincidentally happens to be black, has been described as the Kramer of the show, and I can definitely see why. He not only shares the same quirks as that character, but he also just sort of does whatever he wants. So that gives potential for some hilarious situations. Like when he just out of nowhere reveals that he's fucking bitches on Larry's bed. Leon is a pretty nice guy. I love how he's one of the only few characters who is understanding of Larry's troubles, no matter how absurd they may be, as well as his dedication to having his back. Also, his wordplay and wit are fantastic. Like when Michael J. Fox moved in and was keeping him and Larry up, so he got annoyed and was ready to confront Michael, saying that Michael was about to become Michael J. Fucked Up. And when he called Larry's car the fuck machine after the passenger seat got loose and started to rattle so much it ended up giving Larry all of Larry's dates orgasms when he gave them rides. He was introduced to the show a little later in the series, but he has really helped to carry the show along. I can't imagine the show without him. Last, we have Ted Danson, and while he might not appear in the show as much as the others, he does manage to be pretty funny, not only because of the way he reacts to Larry's foolishness, but also because it seems like he's always trying to one-up Larry, whether it be for Cheryl's attention or who has a better sandwich named after them at their favorite deli. Not much else to say about him since he surprisingly has had a very limited amount of appearances, albeit a bigger role, having a more bigger role in season 10, but he still contributes nicely to this show. Overall, I give characters an A. They all play off of Larry very well, and are all unique in their own, in their own way. Next is humor, and it's absurd, sardonic, twisted, and at times somewhat dark. But the way it is all executed is hilarious because it doesn't take itself too seriously. The writing still manages to find something absurd or outrageous out of all the situations that Larry gets himself into. Like when Larry had a hit placed on him. It's a pretty scary situation, but the writing still manages to make it come off as hilarious. Or when Larry almost caused a young kid on his watch to drown because he didn't want to get his BlackBerry wet. Very intense moment, but the fact it happened because of a fucking BlackBerry is what's truly hilarious. And Larry's way of causing chaos is part of what makes the show great, along with the way people interact off of it, since he's so brutally honest to the point of having little to no tact, as well as the fact that he somehow manages to make things worse than they already are. Like when he heedlessly munched on pistachios while casually apologizing to someone he unintentionally drove into a depression. Over the phone, no less. He apologized over the phone. In Kamikaze Bingo, the Season 5 episode. Overall, this show is really good if you want something that can pull off dark humor correctly. I give humor an A+. Next is acting, and given that 90% of the show is improv, is already really very impressive. The situations in this show can admittedly get very heated, and I think that's because of the performances of the cast. There are times when they actually do seem genuinely frustrated and pissed off because of the circumstances they are in. But it ends up working because not only is it funny in an excessive way, but it also manages to make the show somewhat engaging given how these characters react to everything that's going on. I give Acting an A. Finally, directing. As I said before, the show is all improv basically. So, as Cheryl Hines pointed out, you have to have a lot of cameras going to get all the characters' reactions since they tend to talk over each other. Also, the fact that this show has no laugh track is also refreshing since it almost feels like the comedy comes naturally, and not like you're being told when to laugh. The music also helps with the comedy since a lot of the soundtrack has a goofy and upbeat tone, so it almost feels like a rim shot in a sense, whenever the funny moments come up. I give directing an A+. Overall, Curb Your Enthusiasm is a show that is not afraid to pull a few punches. Any touchy taboo subject you can think of, this show most likely has covered and is done very well in terms of executing it all. Mainly because the main character is very impulsive, has no filter, and is always finding something to fulminate over, no matter how absurd it may be. But what makes Larry David such a complex character is that while he can be a neurotic idiot, there are times where you can't help but to agree with why he's making such a big deal of things, because there are things that happen to him that could happen to anyone. Also doesn't help that sometimes he inadvertently gets himself in ridiculous situations. So he basically does what all of us would want to do if faced with the trouble he experiences. Of course, Larry David is impulsive and can't keep things to himself. But this is why I believe in each and every one of us, there is a tiny little bald man with glasses ranting and raving about every little inconvenience we encounter. I give Curb Your Enthusiasm an A+. I will be legit sad if Season 12 is the last season, given that this show, Has Been Hotel, and Harley Quinn are the only few shows that get edgy humor done correctly. Hell, even when the show isn't making you laugh, which is pretty rare, the writing is still engaging enough and clever enough to keep you engaged. But at the same time, I will be curious about what Larry will possibly do next. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and sub for more content.